Welcome to episode 2 of my Overwatch League Power Rankings. In today's installment, I'll be going over my power rankings for Stage 2. I'm going to start with my number 20 team, and then we'll go from there. With introductions out of the way, let's get straight into things. Starting things off at number 20, I have the Washington Justice. There really isn't much that needs to be said about you guys. You guys were just as bad as everyone expected you to be. You only managed to win one game during Stage 1, and it came against the Florida Mayhem. That isn't exactly a promising result to have for the first stage of your existence. The team did recently acquire Arc from the NYXL, and I do think that's a good pickup for them. However, I still think they're a relatively weak team even with Arc coming onto the squad. The team simply looked lost at times with how indecisive they were during Stage 1, and I don't think Arc alone is going to help solve that problem. In my opinion, the Justice are the weakest team in the league right now, and they're going to have to work really hard if they want to prove me wrong. Coming in at number 19 is the Florida Mayhem. If it weren't for the Justice, I'd say the Mayhem are the worst team in the league coming into Stage 2. Florida, just like with Washington, only managed to win one game during Stage 1, and it came against a fusion squad that was not at its strongest. With Boombox being too sick to play, Elk was forced to play flex support, which is not his natural position, I'd like to add. And even so, the Mayhem still just barely managed to come out on top during that match. I have not liked what Florida has shown me so far. No one has really stood out. Hopefully, Saya Player can become the hero this team so desperately needs when DPS finally comes back. Up next is the LA Valiant, and I'm sure that some of you are going to say that they should without a doubt be number 20 on here since they went 0-7, but I just don't think they're the worst team in the league right now. 3 of their 7 games went to a map 5, and their games against Toronto and Houston went to a 4th map after a tie on Hollywood and Volskaya Industries. And I'd just like to add, they won at least one map even in the games where they looked really bad. But even so, this team still isn't very good. 0-7 is 0-7, and that's unacceptable for a team that did so well during Season 1. There was one good thing that emerged for the Valiant at least, and that's Izayaki. The man was fragging out all stage long, and he's only going to get better as his English improves. While overall playoffs don't seem likely right now for the Valiant, there's still technically a chance. All they really need is a solid Stage 2, and they could be back in the running. Coming in at number 17 is the Paris Eternal. This team was the definition of overhyped. Everyone was freaking out when they crushed the London Spitfire and LA Gladiators, saying they were the best GOATS team and everything, and I for one wasn't ready to jump on the bandwagon after just 2 games, and boy am I glad I listened to myself for once. I will admit though, their schedule wasn't easy, but if they're as good as people said they were at GOATS, then that shouldn't have been an issue for them. I hope the people that were mad at me for having this team so low in my power rankings back in February can finally understand why I put them as low as I did. I had concerns about the talent on their roster, and those flaws showed for most of Stage 1. Soon and Shadowburn looked pretty average on Zarya, Ben Best and Finzi really didn't do much to impress, and Cruz got too aggressive on the Lucio at times. This team has to fix some major issues if they want to turn things around before it's too late. Up next is the Houston Outlaws, and I really wanted to put this team higher up on my list, but the fact of the matter is, they didn't beat a single team with a record better than 3-4 during Stage 1. They beat the Mayhem and the Valiant, who have a combined record of 1-13. And they beat the Spark, who really started to struggle after their first week. I'm not impressed at all by the teams they beat. But even so, there's still definitely hope for these guys. Muma's looked pretty good on Ryan and Winston so far. Dante still has an absolutely amazing Sombra, and he's even shown off a pretty decent Zarya too. And then there's Jake. His impact on Brig has been pretty massive. This team just can't seem to win a team fight when he dies, and that just shows how important he's truly been. Houston is just a few fixed mistakes away from being a pretty good team. At number 15 is the Chengdu Hunters, and if you want to talk about a team that surpassed expectations, then this is your squad. I had these guys dead last in my Stage 1 power rankings, and they made me regret doing that pretty hard. They somehow found a way to make these DPS Wrecking Ball comps work for them. The 3 teams they beat, as well as the Vancouver Titans, shockingly had a hard time dealing with these comps. I'd probably have these guys higher up if they just weren't so darn inconsistent. They looked really bad in the games they lost, and even when they won, they just barely pulled it off every single time. One of the big concerns I had for the Hunters was a lack of talent, and they have certainly proved me wrong there. Jinmu and Ameng have been incredible. Elsa, Late Young, Kyo, and Yvelta also haven't looked too shabby either, and I also really do want to apologize to Bacon Jack while I'm at it. During my Stage 1 power rankings, I called him out. I said he was washed up, but instead, he's looked like a solid and reliable hit scan option, and I could not be more impressed. I'm sorry for doubting your abilities, Bacon Jack. I'll never do it again. At number 14, I have the Hangzhou Spark. Talk about a team that hasn't lived up to the hype so far. Countless experts in the Overwatch League had this team either winning the Pacific Division or making the overall playoffs at the very least. It's still kind of early right now, but things don't exactly look good at the moment. The Spark started off strong by winning their first 2 games, but then they kind of just fell apart after that. The team just couldn't pick between Nosemight and Gushwei, and I think as a result of that, the team just as a whole started to suffer because of it. Everyone looked very lost and uncoordinated during their slump. Losing 4 of your last 5 games is not a good look. I nearly put this team even lower on my list, but I do want to give them the benefit of the doubt since everyone is so high on them. If they slip up again though, then they could very well end up being one of the biggest failures of the year. Something has to change before it's too late. Up next is the Guangzhou Charge. This is one of those teams that I just can't seem to figure out. Some games they look really good, and they can even compete with some of the best teams in the league, but in others they leave a lot to be desired. Players such as Happy, Shu, and Hoppa have been big contributors to this team's success, but at the same time, there's also players like Rio and Chara who I just can't seem to get a good read on. I feel like the Charge just need to fix some of their consistency issues, and then they're going to play a lot better. When this team is at their best, they are scary. They can play well against just about anybody in the league. Stage 2 is going to be very important for the Guangzhou Charge. Will they reveal themselves as dark horse playoff contenders, or are they going to continue to be a mediocre team that never accomplishes anything? My 12th spot belongs to the Shanghai Dragons, and all I really have to say is surprise, surprise. You guys are no longer the laughingstocks of the league. Congratulations. You won 3 games this stage, and you've only looked better since Guangzhou started playing. You by no means look perfect, but I think this team is only going to get stronger when we see the meta change. If the rumors are true about Winston being more involved, then Guangzhou is going to elevate his game to an even higher level. And if DPS ends up being more relevant during stage 2, then DM will probably look a bit more comfortable since he's not going to just be stuck on Zarya all the time. Shanghai could go in a few different directions this stage. They could either be pretty mediocre or end up making a serious splash. Coming in at number 11 is the London Spitfire. What is there to say other than what the heck happened to you guys? Going from Season 1 champs to 3 and 4 in Stage 1 is pretty embarrassing. I already talked about these guys a lot in my last video, so I'm going to keep this brief. London looks like they have no idea how to play GOATs. This is one of the teams who desperately needs Winston and DPS to make a big comeback. The Spitfire aren't a bad team though, I really do believe that. But I might have to change my mind if they continue to play this poorly for a second stage in a row. Now it's time for the second half of the teams, where we start things off with the Atlanta Reign. You guys did slightly better than I thought you would. You even managed to make the Stage 1 playoffs. That's quite the accomplishment. Atlanta isn't a super strong GOATs team though, so I think a meta shift would definitely help them out. Having Defiant back on DPS is going to be great. Oh wait, that's right. He retired. I'm really sorry to all of the Atlanta fans who don't just like this team because of Defiant. This is a significant loss though, and I don't really think it's the end of the world at the same time though for your DPS department. I believe the N layer will do a decent job of filling in for him. Trust me when I say that he is a very capable hit scan player. He's not god tier, but he can definitely hold his own. Then there's Erster. I feel like this dude is just not talked about enough since he's pretty much only played Brig so far, and I would like to add he's looked pretty good on her. But anyway, that's not all he's good at. Erster is a really strong flex DPS player based off of everything I've seen from him during his Contenders days. He can play Projectile, Hit Scan, and even Diva. I think the Reign are still a pretty capable team. They have a solid roster with or without Defiant, so I don't think it's impossible for this team to pull off at least a 3 or 4 win stage. Oh, and one other quick thing about the Reign. Since they lost to Fran, they decided to sign Funny Astro on a 2-way contract. He's a pretty good Lucio player, so the team is going to be in good hands even if something happens to Masa. And who knows, maybe he'll pop off enough and earn an even bigger role on this team. Definitely something worth keeping an eye on if you're an Atlanta fan. Coming in at my number 9 spot is the LA Gladiators, and yes, I know they only went 3 and 4, but you had to be doing something right if you somehow ended up with a +1 map differential. They had a bit of a rocky start while Roar and Decay got used to their new team, but once they adjusted, they ended the stage off on a very positive note by crushing both the Atlanta Reign and the Guangzhou Charge. I think this team picks up where they left off and have a really strong stage 2. And if DPS becomes more relevant, then these guys could become serious threats to everyone else in the league. A DPS rotation of Decay, Surefour, and Hydration sounds like an absolute nightmare to deal with. Having a favorable schedule also gives you a pretty good feeling about the Gladiators coming into stage 2. Next up is the Dallas Fuel. I could not figure out what I thought of these guys after their first 4 games of stage 1. In 2 of their games they looked really good, but in the other 2 they left a lot to be desired. But after that, things started to click. When AKM became the team Zarya player, they looked like a completely different squad. Things looked so good for them, but then they decided to choke away a playoff appearance by losing to the Boston Uprising. But even so, I still have confidence in Dallas coming into stage 2. They have all the tools needed to be successful. My number 7 spot belongs to the Boston Uprising, and this is a team I talked about in my previous video, so I'm going to keep it as brief as possible here. So just like at the beginning of last year, I wasn't giving this team much of a chance, and yet again, they showed me exactly why I need to stop doubting them. Even after a complete overhaul of their roster, they still managed to be relevant by going 4 and 3 and making the stage playoffs. This team has really come together under the leadership of Fusions, and I do not expect them to slow down anytime soon, so long as he remains on the roster. Hopefully those trade rumors about him aren't true. Up next is the Toronto Defiant, and talk about surpassing people's expectations. I thought the Defiant would be decent, but I had doubts about them being a top 8 team. And so far, they're making me eat those words. These guys really look like they're all on the same page with their synergy and now find themselves at 5-2 coming into stage 2. Neko, Envy, and Ivy, they've all been killing it, and I don't see why this team can't make the stage playoffs again if they keep showing me more of what I saw from them during stage 1. Now we're down to the top 5, and we kick things off with the Seoul Dynasty. I expected them to be good, and to most likely make the stage playoffs with the roster additions they made over the offseason, but I never imagined they'd accomplish even more than that. They somehow managed to crush the high expectations I had for them by beating the two teams they have never beaten before, beating London to secure a stage playoff spot, and pulling off an upset against the NYXL in the first round was nothing short of spectacular. I do have some concerns about the Dynasty if the meta decides to shift into one more reliant on DPS, just because I'm not sure how Fletta's partner in crime, whoever it may be, is going to do, but I don't think it's anything they can't overcome if they play the way they did towards the end of stage 1. I'm sure this team's confidence is at an all-time high right now, so I'm expecting the Dynasty to have a really strong stage 2. At number 4, I have the Philadelphia Fusion, and these guys seem to pick up exactly where they left off last year by having a strong 5-2 start to the year. They managed to even be a semi-finalist in the Stage 1 playoffs. The Fusion didn't look amazing on GOATS or anything, but I did really like what I saw from the support line. Boombox, Neptuno, and EQO really did a good job. On the other hand though, Sados, Ryan, and Carpe Zarya didn't look all that good at times, but I don't think it's anything worth worrying about for the most part. But I do think that if DPS and Winston become more relevant, then Carpe and Sato are only going to get better. I'm excited to see how this team does in the stage. The meta will probably be a factor in deciding if this team is good or great. Moving on to my number 3 spot, I have the NYXL, and all I have to say about you guys is wow. You actually choked again, and yet again it was against a team that you've consistently gotten the better of in the past. You guys really have to stop doing this. People are going to continue laughing at you if you don't. But on a more serious note, even though the stage playoffs didn't go the way they hoped it would, the NYXL went 7-0 during stage 1, and Nene has emerged as a superstar in this already star-studded cast. What is there to say about the NYXL that hasn't already been said? They have one of the best players in the league at each position, and they should be even stronger when DPS make their return. Having a DPS rotation of Nene, Libero, Sabiobi, Pine, and Flower just isn't even fair. I fully expect this team to bounce back and look even better coming into stage 2. At my second place spot is the San Francisco Shock, and this is yet another team that has surpassed my expectations. I thought they'd be a playoff caliber team for sure, but to make it to the stage 1 finals while being just a fight or two away from being champions is quite impressive. This is an example of a team that actually lived up to the hype. People said the Shock were for real, and they proved it so far. And the craziest thing about it all is that they can only get better from here. It's clear that this team has what it takes to compete with and defeat the top dogs in the league. I really like where the Shock are at right now. They picked up a flex support god in Violet who could very well walk away with Rookie of the Year, while the rest of their young stars from last year have improved tremendously. I'm excited to see what this team can do when the meta changes too. A DPS rotation of Sinatra, Striker, Rascal, Architect, and Babybay sounds very interesting. I expect the Shock to have an even more dominant stage than they did in stage 1. And last but certainly not least, my number 1 team coming into stage 2 is the Vancouver Titans, and can anyone really blame me for putting them here? They pretty much cruised to a stage 1 title with the exception of a few games along the way. Everyone has looked so strong, and it really shouldn't come as much of a surprise. This team has been together for over a year now, and every single player in their starting lineup is arguably top 5 at their positions right now. I do think they might fall off a bit if DPS becomes more relevant this stage, but they'll still be good either way. I feel that people forget just how good Haxel, Stitch, and Salmon Su really are at DPS. Haxel is an insane projectile player, Stitch is really solid on hit scan, and Salmon Su is an absurdly flexible hero pool. The team formerly known as Runaway hasn't lost a game since July 22nd. Wow. That's actually ridiculous. As long as they keep playing this way, I don't really see why they couldn't continue that streak. And that's pretty much it. Those are my power rankings coming into stage 2 of the Overwatch League. If you enjoyed today's content, then be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new, and feel free to leave your own power rankings down in the comment section, and also don't forget to let me know what you think of my own power rankings list too. Thank you all so much for watching today's video, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.